My name is Kathleen. I'm the program manager, outreach program manager for Pollinator Partnership, and I'm here with Lou Payne from the New York Power Authority, and we'll tell you a little bit about one of our recent projects, which is a case study of NYPA's IVM program and its benefits to pollinators, of course. So, as I said, I'm from Pollinator Partnership, and we work across North America doing research and education. One of the main things we do is translate the research into practice. And so that's what we do mostly with land managers, and that's how we came to work with Lou, who reached out to us, actually. Oops.
All right. So who is the New York Power Authority? What's the New York Power Authority about here? So the New York Power Authority is America's largest state-owned power organization. We're primarily a transmission company. We have lines that run all across New York State, 1,400 circuit miles, which equate out to about 16,000 maintained right-of-way acres out there. And when you look at the system in New York State, we have about 37% of the high voltage transmission system, which is 345 kV through 765 kV. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at New York State, and you can see the picture there of where the lines run across the state, is that the climate regime in New York State really broadly supports forested vegetation. And when you look at where my system is, probably 85% of my system actually runs through forested lands out there. And there's multiple physiogeographic areas throughout New York, and we pretty much hit every one of them. You know, from the river valleys to the mountain ranges to the lake plateaus and all across New York State. So it wasn't too long ago that pollinators really hit the spotlight on the regulatory side. We all heard it coming. We all knew pollinators were in some serious jeopardy out there. And in the Obama administration, they put together a task force and put together an action plan. And at the same time, New York State put together their task force, and they put together a New York State Pollinator Protection Plan. Now, as a New York State agency, we had to look at that pretty serious, and we had to read what the New York State Pollinator Protection Plan was spelling out, and we needed to make sure that we were going to be in compliance with that. And that's at that point is when I actually reached out to Pollinator Partnerships and asked them to come in and take a look at my program and review my program.
So we were going to ask a few broad questions of the NYPA, and of course the first one was whether they complied with the New York State Pollinator Protection Plan, and that meant having to look at their IVM program very carefully. And then once we'd assessed that, the next question, of course, is going to be, so what are the gaps and what are the opportunities for increasing support to pollinators? And so here I'll let Lou explain a bit about his program.
Yeah, so at the New York Power Authority, our vegetation management program has been in place for a very long time. We practice intensive IVM. We've been using the IVM role for probably close to the last 20 years. And we're on what we call a 4-year cycle. So if you're not familiar with that, what a 4-year cycle is, basically we break the 1,400 miles into 4 management segments. So in each year, each one of those management segments go through a different portion of vegetation management. So 1/4 of the system is going to get a vegetation inventory done on it. So we're going to have crews that are going to run down through there. They're going to look at what the vegetation is out there. They're going to key it out between desirable, undesirable. They're going to key it out between land use types and cover types. They're going to make recommended treatments or recommended actions in each one of these polygons that they're going to clip into our GIS program. Another 1/4 of the system is actually going to have vegetation maintenance performed on that 1/4 of the system. So there's going to be vegetation crews that are going to roll down through there. They're going to apply herbicides. They're going to cut some brush. They may cut some small trees. Another portion or another 1/4 of the system goes through what we call a QA/QC. And so that quality control means that another crew is going to come pass down through there and ensure that the work that was supposed to have been done the year before or the year prior is in compliance. We want to make sure that the herbicide applications occurred properly out there, that we got the right controls that we needed out there. We want to make sure that nothing's violating any of the clearance distances or the NERC issues that we may have out there. So what we do with contractors to make sure that happens is we do hold retainage. So we withhold 10% retainage to ensure that this QA/QC portion gets done. And then on the last segment or the last quarter of the system, we just have patrols. So we have a couple aerial patrols and a foot patrol. And this is rotated through the 4 years. So the quarter of the system that's on the inventory this year, next year we'll have the veg maintenance work done on it. The year after that will be the QA/QC, then the patrols, then it comes back around. So think about that for a second. When you start hearing about herbicide activities out there, and when you have a good sound IVM program like this, the herbicides are only applied in that particular site once every 4 years. So it is not like we're applying herbicides multiple times per year or multiple years in a row. So back in 2013, we decided we ought to reach out and see what this right-of-way steward utility program is about. So we were the third utility to go through this program where we became an accredited right-of-way steward. And it's a pretty intensive program. There's the Right-of-Way Stewardship Council that's involved in this. There's 10 to 12 principles, and there's about 40 plus criterion that you have to answer. So they come in, they do a very intensive document review. They come in on site. They interview different folks that are involved in the program. They want to see how you're going to match up with all the principles that they set out and the criteria that's involved with each principle. And so it takes about a week of them being on site. It takes probably a week or so of them to do the document review, and then they put it all together and make a decision whether we are a right-of-way steward or not. And we passed that thing with pretty good levels. And that's something we have to maintain for 5 years. So each year there's either a desk audit or another one-day audit involved with that. So we've gone through that for the 5 years, the first 5 years, and we're looking at it again, starting that whole process over again. It's a nice stamp of approval. This thing is just, it's a good stamp of approval to say that the IVM program or the whole vegetation management program that we have in place, is top notch. When we look at GIS, and we use GIS, we've been using GIS since '98. We built the GIS program at the Power Authority around vegetation management. So we've been using it for a long time, and it's really our key management tool that we have. And like I said, it's involved in our inventory. It's involved in our maintenance work. So not only do our inventory crews and now our maintenance crews or our contract crews, they carry tablets in the field, which have our GIS program built right on there. And you can see the drawing there on the slide, and you can see the polygons that were snapped in place. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see yellow lines on each side. So that site was identified as a low-vine foliar site. It's snapped in place. It has the acres on there. It has the landowner information, has all the pertinent information that the crew that's going to do the work out there needs to have. So when he walks out on site with his tablet, shows right where he's at, shows right there what he's got to do. Then when he gets done doing his work, he's got to capture some data and put that in there as well. So we're capturing treatment data as well. And we've been doing this for close to 20 years. So I have this whole cycle. We're coming in like the 5th time around, I think, now with all this data. Now we started pulling in LiDAR. So we've been using LiDAR, which is light detection imagery, so we know what the height of vegetation is out there. We know what the height is on the right-of-way. We know what the height of the trees along the edge of the right-of-way are. So we can identify what vegetation may be an issue for us. We can model it with our system, so if we have max sag conditions, we know what could trip the line, or we know what could potentially violate minimum clearance distances by NERC. So now our crews, they go out and look at that, look at the trees along the edge. We have another program called Data Splice. So they go out with their tablet, they walk up to the tree, they pull down a drop down, they identify the tree by species, diameter, a couple other features. When they close that out, it goes real time into a work management system, so it creates a work order. So the crews are assigned that specific work. So that's kind of how involved we are right now. But again, I needed to make sure that we were going to fall into compliance with this pollinator stuff that was coming down the pike.
So what does this all mean for pollinators? Well, basically, by having such a high resolution collection of data through their IVM program, by using GIS and GPS in real time, and analyzing this data, NYPA has been able to demonstrate that they're using fewer herbicides over time, and they've also increased the amount of desirable vegetation within these polygons and overall throughout their jurisdiction. So one of the things in the pollinator protection plan from the state was actually somewhat ambiguous around the use of herbicides, specifically as it relates to rose. And the general recommendation was to decrease herbicide, and there was not really any recognition within the plan that one of the best management practices for rose is actually to use these selective, targeted, low-volume foliar sprays. And so by having this data, NYPA is able to demonstrate that they are actually very much in compliance with the aspirations of the aspirations of the plan. And also, this type of management, as I'm sure you're all aware, creates phenomenal pollinator habitat, and that is indeed what we saw. And so these are similar to a lot of the other photos that, just realized I'm speaking into the mic just now. So we have some lovely examples here of beautiful native plants, some monarchs, some swallowtails. We were out on the lines for a day and saw all kinds of very interesting bees. And so when you already have an IVM program that is already basically a gold standard program, where do you go from here? And this is where actually Lou came up with a very great suggestion that we were very, very happy to help him implement. And this ties in perfectly with their GIS program. So basically, because they're already collecting all this data, they, by making a small tweak to their operations, can make a huge contribution to our understanding of pollinator ecology in rose. And that is the bee survey that they are starting to implement this year. And I'll let Lou speak a bit about that.
Yeah, so when Kathleen and Vicki came in and to look at the project, I was actually hoping that when they got there, they were going to have that wow factor. That when they came out and saw what I was doing out here on my rights of way, because I've been doing this a long time, and like I said, we've been practicing intensive right-of-way management. We're encouraging that shrub, scrub, low-growing plant community out there. We're letting that natural vegetation be there on site. It's my biological control. And so when they came in here and we started talking about where we can go and where, move from there, we started looking at this bee survey. So what we decided was that we were going to do some transects out there. We were going to pull in my forestry staff and we're going to pull in my inventory crews, train them, and then let them do this bee survey. Basically, it's a 100-yard transect where they're looking 10 feet on either side. They look at the plant species that are in bloom at the time that they're there, and then they count what bees. It's just a simple survey. Is there bumblebees on the blackberries that are in bloom, and how many, in this transect? Is there honeybees, etc.? So they're gonna do this. It's going to be tied right to GIS. With my inventory crews, they're there about 6 weeks, so I'm having them do it the same time every day. At lunchtime, they do this transect, they capture it, they put it into GIS. My foresters will do it about every other week. So in the course of 4 years, I will have all this data across my whole system. It's going to be random. It's going to be wherever they happen to be. And what this is going to do for me, because I know the vegetation's out there, I know the insects are out there, this is going to prove it. So again, with a solid integrated vegetation management program, what were we seeing? We were seeing reductions in non-compatible densities and non-compatible heights out there. We were seeing this increase in compatible vegetation densities. We saw a decrease in herbicide use rates out there. So this was bringing my direct costs down. So I was able to shift some of these direct costs that are in my program and start to shift them over to some other things. Other things such as fixing access roads, building a pollinator program, that kind of stuff. And it's all about education too, because we got to communicate this and bring that knowledge transfer to the crews that are out there doing our work. You know, so we spend a lot of time with this training, developing our crews. We look at our crews as agents of the company. And so we're telling them, like I said, with that GIS, we're telling them what we want them to do on each site, what the herbicide we want them to apply, and what type of techniques. So it's important to develop this training. We've got resources. We've developed fact sheets and ID manuals out there. And then now at this data collection, and we're going to start pulling all that data together and look at it again some more. And that I guess is that. So